In this lesson, we'll be doing an introduction to JavaScript for loops. Often when we're programming, we find that we have a section of code, several instructions that we want to repeat over and over and over again. It's bad programming practice to take that code and copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. If you find out later that you need to make a change to that, then you've got to go change it in all those different places. It's much better to write that code once and then use a loop, and that loop will cycle or iterate over that code time and time again. There's several different types of loops in programming. In this lesson, we're going to focus on a for loop. When we're writing loops, there's a little bit of mathematic notation that we need to understand, incrementing and decrementing. So when we're incrementing, we're increasing a value consistently by the same amount. So you can see here in the example, I have x equals x plus 1. In this case, addition, and this looks odd in math to us, right? We're having x on both sides of the equation. But in programming, addition happens first. So what we're doing here is we're taking the current value of x, adding 1 to it, and then storing it back in x. So if x was 5, 5 plus 1 is 6, and x is now 6. The next time, it would be 6 plus 1 becomes 7. This code, x equals x plus 1, there's a shorthand for it. It can also be written as x plus equals 1. Decrementing is going the other direction. We're decreasing a value by the same amount. So same situation, y equals y minus 3. We take the value of y, we subtract 3 from it, and store that result back in y. And again, alternatively, this can be notated as y minus equals 3. We can do the same thing with multiplication. We can do it with division, and we can do it with modulus. Special situation, if we're incrementing or decrementing by 1, that's a very common situation. So when we write x equals x plus 1, which we already know we can write as x plus equals 1, that can also be written as x plus plus. If you ever heard of the programming language C++, the original programming language was C. C++ was the next iteration of C, or the next generation of C, so they named it C++. Similarly, we can do it with decrementing, y equals y minus 1. That becomes y minus equals 1, and that can become just y minus minus. Please remember these last shortcuts here are only for incrementing or decrementing by 1. If I add another plus or add another minus, it doesn't make it go up or down by 2. This only works when incrementing or decrementing by 1. All right, couple loop basics. Loops will continue executing their code until a certain condition is met. All loops have the following 4 main parts. There is a loop control variable initialization, which means we create a loop variable and we give it a value. There's a loop condition that is used to exit the loop. We have to use the loop control variable in that. We have the body, which is the code that we're repeating, and we have a loop control variable alteration that's changing the loop control variable. If we fail to write our condition correctly, or we fail to write our alteration correctly, we could end up in what's called an infinite loop, where the program never ends. For this reason, I strongly suggest when you're doing loops, especially at this point in programming, that you not use alert windows. If you get caught in an infinite loop with alert windows, you're going to have to totally close down your browser to end it. So for that reason, I strongly suggest that you use a document.writes when you're doing these loops. Okay, so a for loop is a pre-test loop, and that means that the condition is tested before the loop executes. So we come down here, come down the program, we test the expression. If it's true, we execute the body, we come back around, we test the expression. If it's still true, we come back around. If it's still true, we execute the body, we come back around. Once this expression becomes false, then we bypass the loop body and go on with the rest of the program. But because a for loop is a pretest loop, it's conceivable that the first time we come down here, if this expression tests to false, then we go around and continue with the rest of the code, the body of the loop never executing. All right, here's a basic structure and syntax of a for loop. In lowercase, we write the word for, and then we have a set of parentheses. We have the initialization, a semicolon, a condition, a semicolon, an update, and the parentheses. Notice the lack of semicolon here, just like after an if condition, there's no semicolon here. Then we get our curly braces, and in here is the body. So the initialization here is we're going to create and initialize a variable. So for example, var x equals 1. The condition is something that it will evaluate to true or false that uses the loop control variable, a Boolean expression, something like x less than or equal to 5. And the update is some alteration of the control variable. So in this case, x plus plus. Now let's take a look at an example. Here we go. We've got for var count equals 1. That's my initialization. Count less than or equal to 4. That's my condition. Count plus plus. That's my alteration. Here's my loop body. It's just one statement that outputs the count is and shows the count variable. And then I've got done at the end of the program. Now, when I read this for loop, it helps sometimes to read it in this way. Var count equals 1 as long as count is less than or equal to 4. And when we read it that way, then we have a better understanding of when the loop is going to run. The loop is going to start at 1 and it will continue running as long as count is less than or equal to 4. And in each case, we're going to increase count. So here we go. The first thing that happens is we declare the variable count. And that out in memory creates this box called count. Then count gets set equal to 1, and you can see over here in memory, count is equal to 1. The next thing that happens is we say, okay, well, let's compare that to 4. Is 1 less than or equal to 4? Yes, it is. Since it is, the body executes. Count is 1, we get that output. Then it goes up and it increments count, so count becomes 2. After the initial start of the loop, this piece of the loop is done. And we go condition, body, alteration, condition, body, alteration. So after this alteration, we go back, we check the condition again. 2 is less than or equal to 4. So we get output and we increment again. Count is now 3. 3 is less than or equal to 4. So we run the body, we increment, count is now 4. 4 is less than or equal to 4. We run the body, we increment, count is now 5. 5 is not less than or equal to 4, so we do not run the body. We go to the end of the loop and we continue with the rest of the program, and that will then write done. Here's another example. I have var num for num equals 1, as long as num is less than or equal to 3, num plus plus, document.write potato plus num. So I'm going to trace this for us. When num is 1, 1 is less than or equal to 3, I see potato 1. When it's 2, 2 is less than or equal to 3, I see potato 2. When it's 3, 3 is less than or equal to 3, I see potato 3. 4, it becomes 4 is not less than or equal to 3, so nothing happens. So here's an example where we say var count equals 1, count less than or equal to 10, count plus plus, document.write. It certainly looks like I'm going to start at 1, I'm going to go up to 10 by 1s, that I should get 10 stars output. But the output of this program is only 1 star. Why? Well, because this programmer made a common syntax error and they put a semicolon at the end of their loop statement, which says, for var count equals 1, count less than or equal to 10, incrementing by 1, do nothing. And so that loop runs 10 times doing nothing and then outputs a star. To make this program work the way we expected, we would not put our semicolon there. All right. We can write loops in a lot of different ways and they all can do the same thing. So I'm going to write a loop that executes code 10 times. Here's the example most of us would think of. For var x equals 1, as long as x is less than or equal to 10, x plus plus. That's going to run at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it will break out after x becomes 11. Here's another way to do that same thing. I start at 0 and go less than 10. So that runs it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When it becomes 10, it doesn't execute anymore. So it ran 10 times, just 0 through 9. Here's another one. For var equals 10, as long as x is greater than or equal to 1, x minus minus. So now we're counting down. This is going to run at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's going to break when it hits 0. For var x equals 2, as long as x is less than or equal to 20, x plus equals 2, it's going to run at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. For var x equals 30, as long as x is greater than 0, x minus equals 3. It's going to run at 30, 27, 24, 21, 18, 15, 12, 9, 6, and 3. It will not run at 0 because this is greater than 0, not greater than or equal to 0. And then here's one more. For var x equals 512, as long as x is greater than or equal to 1, x divided by equals 2. It's going to run at 512, 256, 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1. There are infinitely more versions of this that we can write. They are all correct. They all run their loop 10 times. All right. Here's a couple of questions. I want you to take a few minutes and I want you to stop the presentation and I want you to answer these questions on a piece of paper. And then you can, once you answer them, you can then go on. So at this point, stop your video. Okay, so here's the answers. The first program right here, how many times does this run? It runs at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which means it's running 11 times because it actually ran at 0. Second one, write the heading of a for statement whose loop control variable y starts at 10, increments by 5, and stop when it reaches 100. That's for var y equals 10. As long as y is less than or equal to 100, y plus equals 5. And then finally, what's the output of the following code segment? Var limit equals 10. And then I'm going to output gr. And then I'm going to say for count equals 8, as long as count is less than or equal to 10, count plus plus output an e. So it outputs an e at 8, it outputs an e at 9, it outputs e at 10. At 11, the loop ends, and then it outputs NLEE. So my output is GREEENLEE. All right, a little more practice. Same types of questions, but I've changed a few things, so pay careful attention to each of them, please. Stop the video now and answer these questions. Okay, here are the answers. For the first one, for var count equals 11, as long as count is greater than or equal to 10, count plus plus. This loop runs forever, infinitely. It starts at 11. 11 is bigger than or equal to 10, so it becomes 12, which is also bigger than or equal to 10, 13, 14, 15, etc. Something here has to give. Either this has to be less than or equal to 10, which means it wouldn't run, or more likely, this has to be minus minus. All right, so we have to be really careful about counting up and counting down and what happens here and what happens there. All right, next one, writing the heading of a for statement. For var y equals 50, as long as y is greater than or equal to 10, y minus equals 2. And then down in this last one, we swap the limit and count variables. So now the limit is 8 and the count is 10, while count is less than or equal to limit. Well, 10 is not ever less than or equal to 8, which means this code never runs. I get my GR, I get my NLEE, but I don't get any E's in between them. All right, one last thing, the break statement. JavaScript has something called a break statement that we can use to get out of a loop prior to the completion of the loop. So down here, you'll see that I've got a loop set to run 10 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And each time I'm just going to say iteration number and output that value. Inside of it, I wrote a condition that says if x is equal to 5, break. So it's going to run at 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to output iteration number 5, and then it's going to see this. It is going to leave the loop, and it's going to continue with the rest of the program. So if for some reason you need to get somebody out of a loop, this is one way to do it. Okay, here's some practice. Write a program that asks a user for a number and their name. When they finish with the input, display their name that number of times in the document. In a second, you're going to answer this question, and then I'll talk about the answer. But before I do that, don't forget, out on the web page, there's lots more info. There's lecture notes, there's lecture code, there's all kinds of different pieces of information out of the website, so please get out there. And then you've got practice problems that you should be working on, level 1, level 2, and level 3 practice problems also out on the website. All right, at this point, pause the video and solve this problem. And when you're ready, you can start the video again for the solution. So pause your video now. Okay, welcome back. I hope that went well. Let's take a look at the solution. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them for a number, which I want to treat as a number. So as always, I'm going to parse int it. Then I'm going to ask them for a name. And then I'm going to run a loop that goes from 1 up to and including the number they put in. So if they put in 10, this is going to go 1 to 10. If they put in 20, it's going to go 1 to 20, etc., etc. X plus plus. And then each time I'm going to document.write name and a line break. That's the solution to the problem. Thanks for joining us this time, and I'll talk to you next time.